Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the IBS Freedom Podcast. I am joined by my quite amazing co-host, Amy Hollenkamp, registered dietitian extraordinaire to the stars. Or to you here on the podcast. Hey.
Yeah, to the stars.
The stars. I'm going to go with it. You're all stars.
Okay.
You're all perfect and wonderful.
Okay.
But
actually, I will add there is an RD that I know that has worked with celebrities in LA, and she is a true registered dietitian to the stars.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'm going to go with my theory that all of you are stars, and therefore, yes, you are all precious stars to us. But I digress in this weird introduction for the week. So today's topic, I think, is pretty cool and maybe unexpected. I mean, you would expect to get things like microbiome and fiber and prebiotics and probiotics on a podcast such as ours. But today I told Amy I really wanted to talk about fasting, and maybe we could touch a little bit on intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating. But I am on day 2 of what will probably be a 3 or 4 day fast. So I thought it would be really fun to talk about fasting while I'm fasting and nerd out a little bit on the science and why on earth would I not eat for a couple of days, and talk about some of the considerations if you are on a healing journey, like should you fast or should you not? So Amy, to put you completely on the spot yet again, do you want to kick us off, maybe give us a little bit of an intro about like what the difference is between fasting versus intermittent fasting versus time-restricted eating versus any variants that I'm not thinking of, and then maybe throw in a couple of 2 cents to get us started?
Yeah, I think, fasting's such a broad category of things. And, some people are doing more extended style fasting, like what you're doing, where it's days on end. I also think it's interesting that a lot of cultures have fasting built in. Yeah. I have a lot of people that celebrate Ramadan, and it's interesting the fasting that goes on during that period of time. For those that are celebrating Ramadan, and again, a lot of different cultures and religions have periods of time when they're fasting. So it is something that we've done for a long period of time, just like ingrained in our culture. And I always find that that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Like we as a human species have done it for a while.
Right. And I think, I always think the most popular form of fasting is intermittent fasting. Typically, again, I would say the typical pattern is like I never know if it's 8-16 or 16-8, like if you say one before the other.
I forget too.
But the typical pattern that I see people doing with intermittent fasting is typically, but not always, like skipping breakfast and eating like around noon, and then before 8 or whatever, they have an 8-hour window where they're eating. That tends to be the most popular fasting that I see people doing on a regular basis. But again, I think we could talk to you a lot about like what, and it might, I would say that it almost takes a level of experimentation to figure out what form of fasting is going to be right for you. Yeah. I personally have done 16-8 before, where it was more of a skipping breakfast, eating at noon, then eating like a dinner at like 7 or whatever, and fasting the rest of the time. And I found that I needed to tweak that a little bit. Like slightly, like eat a little bit earlier. So like you may need to adjust the timeline. And I think that that's just a really important point to start out with, that there's still a level of experimentation with fasting.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing it ongoing, not like what you're doing where it's like a 3-day fast and then you're breaking the fast and going back to eating relatively normally. But if you're doing like more extended fasting, that can take a little bit of experimentation. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that too.
Yeah. And have you read it all? Like, so to go back, so I guess we'll start off the conversation for sake of telling people what to expect. We'll start off talking about intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating, which honestly, like, they're basically the same thing, right? Am I losing my mind? I think they're the same thing. And it's just, you have a shorter window of time where you're allowed to eat, and then a longer period of time where you're not eating anything. Right? And like, people just call it two different things, is my understanding.
Right. That's my understanding too. I think that they're pretty similar. And again, I think for the intermittent fasting scenario, I think that there's a lot of like dogma around the time frame of like, oh, you can eat at noon and then stop at 6 or whatever. There's a lot of dogma. Like, it feels like that's really standard and protocol-y in general in the fasting space, but it doesn't have to be that window. It could be, again, a different window. Sometimes eating a little bit earlier, like people find having an earlier window is more helpful. So again, I think usually with intermittent fasting and time restricted eating, there's a level of experimentation to figure out what works well with you, and sometimes even playing around with the length of the fast on a more regular basis. If you're doing more regular fasting, maybe 14-hour fast is going to be a little bit better for you than a 16-hour fast. Or 15 hours. Like, you can experiment a little bit. You could still get the benefits of having some fasting without having to go the full 16 hours if that doesn't feel right for you. Maybe that changes over time, but I think that it's just important to keep in mind that experimentation is still something that can be valuable when you're doing fasting, and it doesn't have to be
the authorities say you have to do it this way.
Right. It's not set in stone. It's still something you need to listen to your body and figure out if it's helping, and if you need to tweak anything. It's still really valuable to listen to your cues. Yeah.
And I think that makes a really good point. Again, like, there's so many protocols, and I'm sure that there's like a million Instagram experts and YouTube videos and podcasts and who knows what else that say you have to do it a certain way. But it's like, you've got to figure out what works for you. And kind of, I'm going to give away a spoiler for later on in the conversation. Another one that I failed to mention was the fasting mimicking diet. I don't know if you're familiar with that as much, but like, I tried fasting mimicking first, FMD, and I barely felt any difference doing it. I was like, oh, all right. Like, I could do it. It wasn't hard, but like, I didn't feel different. And it supposedly has all of the same benefits as fasting. But for me, the difference between doing FMD, fasting mimicking diet, versus a true water and tea only fast is hugely different.
Yeah.
So like, even just playing with it, like, we have data that, and I like the FMD. I think it's a great tool. I've done both the Prolon version and the FMD, like, DIY version. But like, that wasn't something that made me feel profoundly better. But for me, like, when I do fasting like I'm doing today, I feel like $1 million. Like, I am on it.
Right.
So you've got to play around with it and see what your body responds to. I also have noticed, like, I don't do time restricted eating in my normal life. I don't think it's necessary for every single person to do.
Yeah.
Like, I wake up, we wake up around 7-ish. I usually eat breakfast at 7:30, maybe 8. I eat lunch around noonish, and then usually we're having dinner around 5:30. But I also make a point to not snack in the middle of the day. Like, kind of the evil twin to fasting is the whole, like, eat 6 small meals a day to stabilize your blood sugar. Remember that bullshit? And it's still out there, but like, in undergrad and grad school and like seminars, I have heard so many people say that you have to eat 6 small meals a day to stabilize your blood sugar. And now, thank God, we're starting to pivot on that and realize, oh, whoopsie-doo. We told all of you the wrong thing for like 2 or 3 decades. And now we're realizing that, no, you should probably not snack at all, actually. And you should be doing like 2 or 3 square meals a day, and that's it. And oh, by the way, maybe don't eat for like a day and see how you feel. So it's kind of funny how like the nutrition world is coming around full circle again. It's like the pendulum of like, low fat everything in the 80s, and now high fat keto everything in the 2000 somethings. And give it another couple decades and we'll swing back the other way super aggressively. And,
right. It's like doubling down on.
Yeah. And it's like, the 90s and the 2000s, eat 6 small meals a day to stabilize your blood sugar or you're going to be fat. And now it's like, time restricted eating, only eat 2 meals a day and skip breakfast. It's like,
right. And I think you're right. Talking about, even just eating like 3 square meals and not eating tons of snacks is a really great place to start. Like if you're feeling very overwhelmed by fasting, that's certainly a really, really good start point. Is do 3 meals a day, see how you feel. You might feel great doing 3 meals a day. You can experiment with doing 2 meals a day. Like you can experiment and see sort of if you notice benefit. If you feel like you're not noticing a benefit between 2 or 3 meals a day, you could always just stick to the 3 meals a day. Maybe that's going to work best for you. So, I mean, I think it's all about doing some experimentation, feeling what works for you. I will say my only caveat to, and this comes up a lot in the SIBO space because of wanting to fast between meals to support the migrating motor complex. Yep. So wanting to help support motility and doing some fasting.
Yeah.
So I will say that in the SIBO space, I generally will try to get someone's calorie needs met before doing any fasting. Yes. That's my main...
I knew you were going to say this at some point, and I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you for saying that, because I've had people ask me, oh, should I do fasting, or oh, should I do time-restricted eating? And it's like, well, if you've lost a bunch of weight and you're already on a restricted diet and you've been trying to heal, and like, if you're struggling to add foods back in, do that first, and then maybe like a year from now or 5 years from now, like maybe later on in your life, you can do fasting, but don't do fasting if you're already malnourished. Like, don't double down on the malnourishment.
Right. And I feel like it feeds into the whole mindset in the SIBO space of trying to starve the SIBO. Yep. It's very similar to that in my head. And I think the fear of not fasting is comparable to avoiding foods to prevent SIBO. Mm-hmm. And I usually will, when I work with people, it's like first kind of analyzing their general thoughts and beliefs around foods. Where are we at there? Because if we don't get that squared away, or at least start working on it, it's going to be hard to get them nourished.
Yeah.
So like the mindset piece, I think, is the first piece I usually focus in on. And then it's like, where are calories falling? Where are macros falling? So general nutrition, where are those things falling? Yeah. And you can kind of look at micronutrients, and then fasting. Like, I think from a priority list, you need to make sure you're well nourished, like you were saying, before doing any fasting, because it will backfire, and
you might just feel like shit doing it too.
Right, exactly. You'll feel like shit. It won't be helpful, and it will really be counterproductive. So it's really just key to make sure that you're able to get enough nutrition. And I think that I find sometimes it's also done wrong. Like someone that does intermittent fasting, if they just cut out a meal and don't replace the calories that they need as well, if their calories are too low during the intermittent fast, that can stress out their body too. So I also feel it's very important to note that if you are cutting out meals, to do a more intermittent fasting style of 2 meals a day, to make sure you're cluing in on calories, and
those meals.
Making sure your meals are like your 3 meals, but just 2 meals in terms of nutrition.
Yeah.
Which can be sometimes a little bit of a challenge for some. So it's an important thing to note if you're experimenting with fasting, is to make sure you're able to get enough overall nutrition in, whether you're cutting to 2 meals or if you've already been struggling to get nutrition in. Just a key area to check in on. And you could even do a little bit of tracking too, to make sure that you're getting enough calories in for a few days if you are doing some fasting.
Yeah, I think, like we were saying, if you have IBS or SIBO or IBD or GERD and you've been struggling to take in nutrition, like don't restrict your poor body further. Like part of your healing journey needs to be giving your body the tools that it needs. And like fasting and time restricted eating can be wonderful because they can help lower inflammation, which can facilitate healing. And it can help promote motility, which facilitates healing. And it can be good for the brain and therefore probably the vagus nerve. Like there's benefits, but if the cost is going to be that you become more depleted and more malnourished and more terrified of food and like more, you know, in a bad place with your body, it doesn't make sense. And I'll say for the record, like the fact that I could do this now is a wonderful testament to my healing journey, because point blank, I would never, ever have been able to do this in, what was it, like 10, 12 years ago when my gut was really bad. Back in the day, I was so inflamed, I think, that I couldn't go more than like 3 hours without eating, without getting a massive hunger headache. Guaranteed. Like I was the person, I would eat breakfast at home. I would bring a mid-morning snack and a lunch and a mid-afternoon snack to school. And then I would eat dinner, and then I would eat like a pre-dinner snack. And if I skipped one of those stupid 6 small meals in my day, I would get a hunger headache, or I would feel queasy, or like if I stood up too quickly, I would feel really dizzy and passy-outy. And I carried a granola bar in my purse everywhere I went, because the thought of being somewhere where I didn't have food and getting the hunger headache was so awful to me that I was like, nope, I have to keep a granola bar on my person at all times. And like, I know that at that time I wasn't ready for it, but looking back, I'm pretty sure I had SIBO. Per stool testing, I had candida overgrowth. I had 2 parasites. I sure as heck had some sort of a leaky gut, and I had some gut-brain axis, stress, adrenal shit going on. So like at the time, it didn't make sense for me to even try fasting, because my body would have been so pissed and miserable the entire duration of the fast that it would have been a net inflammatory response for me rather than a net anti-inflammatory response. It's only now that I'm years out from that I started playing with this because I wanted to help patients, and I wanted to understand fasting as a tool so that I could coach people through it more efficiently. And then I accidentally discovered, oh my God, I feel amazing when I do this. And now it's just a thing that I'm hooked on and I do every couple months.
Yeah.
But like, it didn't even really cross my mind for therapeutic value for me. And I sure as hell wouldn't have done it 10 years ago. But now I'm at a point where I can. And I'm glad that I can.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. I remember at one point, like healing journey wise, when just hearing you look back, where I was like eating in the middle of the night. Like there were a couple like nights where I couldn't even last. Like I'd wake up so hungry and I couldn't fall asleep if I didn't eat something. Like there were periods of time where my blood sugar was definitely all over the place. And I find that sometimes bringing up the 6 small meals as a way to balance blood sugar, I think there's also certain people that need to eat like solid meals to actually feel satiated as well, versus like I found when I ate, like I could eat 6 small meals and still be hungry and feel like my level of like satiation was never reached because my meals were so small. I don't know if anyone else has felt that way, but I always wonder a little bit about that. Like
I definitely have.
If you're never eating a full complete meal and you're pretty much just eating these small mini meals across the whole day, you're grazing a lot. I just wonder if like satiety doesn't ever really get reached. But you kind of get enough to sustain you and hold you over. I always felt like that way when I ate smaller meals. But yeah, when I was going through my gut journey, oh my gosh, my blood sugar was a mess. And I couldn't go long without eating. And I do think that that's a good thing to clue in on as well. If you are experimenting with fasting, if you feel like, you know, blood sugar's unstable, I'd first again check calories. Like if you feel like you're getting hunger headaches or like fatigue or dips in energy or shaky, lightheaded, any of those things, like again, I'd check for calories. I probably would stop fasting for a few days check calories again, make sure that that's good. And again, maybe it's just you're not ready for it at that particular point in time. But yeah, I think it's the blood sugar stuff is what I would typically look out for in someone that's fasting, and to ensure that they're not having any blood sugar swings. Yeah. So that, like you're saying, the net benefit of the fasting is greater than like any potential con, being a little bit under or pushing your body a little bit more. And there's like a hormesis type effect with fasting. So yeah, I think fasting can be so powerful. I've definitely seen it be powerful. I've done intermittent fasting. I can talk a little bit about that. I actually had some weird blood sugar stuff going on, and intermittent fasting seemed to help. Okay. Which is strange because typically I wouldn't think that. Like I don't typically see that.
You mean like hypoglycemia, I assume, right?
No, I was hyper.
Oh, okay.
I was probably swinging a bit. Like there were times where I was a little bit under, but I was having more hyper issues. And doing like an intermittent fast seemed to help. I did the traditional, like I said, like 8 at noon, like lunch, and then 8 at dinner. I did find that like if I was gonna do, and I don't do that anymore, like what you're saying, I pretty much just eat 3 square meals. Yeah. But I found that my blood sugar actually stabilized when I got enough nutrition in, and I found that I also did a little bit better if I ate more at like 10:30 or 11 than when I ate at noon. Yeah. So it took a level of experimentation to like I almost did better with like trying to think of how many hours are in a day if I'm doing this correctly. Is it still 16:8 if I ate at 11 and then 6? No. I don't know. Math is hard.
No, you're actually doing a little bit better even. It would be like 17:7.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so so I would that would be typically what I would do, is like 2 meals a day, but I felt a little bit better like if I ate at like between 10 or 11 and then 6 versus doing the traditional like I think traditional maybe it's noon to 8 p.m. is the typical one that I hear. Is that what you hear with the 16:8?
I think it's because our brains have like breakfast time, lunch time, dinner time kind of pre-programmed. And I think that a lot of people wind up doing noon because it's just like, it's easier to just completely delete breakfast and then go right on to lunch. And then lunchtime is noontime. Right. So I think that's why it does seem like that's the most typical. Have you delved into this? And this is sometimes like, it's a conversation that quite frankly nobody wants to have. But if you're trying to go all in and be an overachiever with this intermittent fasting thing, what is your take on skipping breakfast versus skipping dinner?
Oh, yeah. This is such a great question. I actually think that, honestly, probably skipping dinner would be better. I know a lot of the circadian rhythm experts recommend that style more so than eating like a later dinner at 8 p.m. Because if you're eating a pretty big meal and you're going to bed at 7 or 8 and then you're going to bed at 10,
digesting that food.
Right. Like I definitely think eating an earlier dinner makes more sense than eating like if you're eating 2 meals a day and that meal has to be pretty large, that could be a little bit more problematic depending on the person. And I also think you're probably going to get more benefit skipping dinner, but I also think that's a harder one socially to skip.
That's the thing. Yeah. And everybody is, we're going to harp on it again, guys, prepare. Everybody is stressed out of their minds and doing a shitty job managing their stress. We all need to be in therapy. We all need to be following the holistic psychologist on Instagram. And our vagus nerves are fried and our adrenals are fried and our brains are fried. And it's just like people, it's so much easier and it's so much more appealing to skip breakfast because then it's like, all right, like I'm running out the door and I'm stressed out of my mind and I got a shitty night's sleep and like, oh, convenient. I don't have to eat breakfast. Cool. And then you run out the door and you sprint through your stressful damn life. And then you get home and you can just crash and burn and eat dinner at home. Like that's so much more appealing than taking the time and putting in the effort to make yourself a really nice, big, nourishing breakfast. Take your time and enjoy that freaking food. And then also prepare a nice, nourishing, large lunch and then skip your dinner. Like it's so much tougher to do that. And frankly, I brought this up with a couple of people, like, well, if you want to do things the best way, theoretically, that's probably where you would land.
Right.
And I have yet to have anybody take me up on that offer. They're like, no, I'm just going to skip breakfast, whatever. And it's like, all right, it's your journey. I don't want to do that.
Right.
Like, it's easier for me to just not eat at all for 3 days and do this style where, like, I feel like $1,000,000 and I get the anti-inflammatory benefit. And then I just go back to eating like normally and I eat 3 meals a day. I also don't have anything profound going on with my health these days, but I find this makes me feel a lot better than IF or FMD ever did. And it's much more doable like in my life. But yeah, I think skipping breakfast is honestly not the best way to do it, but it's also the most practical thing for human existence because we're all stressed and have crispy adrenals. So
right. I think it's funny that we're talking about skipping breakfast because my whole life I didn't eat breakfast. Like as a kid, like I never ate breakfast. I never ate breakfast in high school. It's so weird. I mean, I was intermittent fasting pretty much my whole life. But it wasn't because I was doing it on purpose, obviously, as a kid. It's like because as a kid, I was probably stressed out trying to get out the door, waking up 5 minutes before I had to leave. There was no time to eat breakfast. So again, it's funny. Crispy. They were crispin for sure. They were frying up like scrambled eggs at that time probably. But yeah, I think that is really how it's so easy to skip breakfast. And I think it's cool that you're doing the longer fasting. I haven't experimented with that personally, but super intrigued by it. Is there anything that you take like during the fast? Like, do you do any supplements or is it really just water, or do you do any electrolytes?
No, I haven't yet. Maybe I should play with it. Maybe I should share more. Maybe I'm doing it all wrong. No, I started, so for me, I did the FMD version first. I did a Prolon kit. So for those of you who don't know, Prolon is like a kit with all your food in it for 5 days, and you eat, it's a low calorie, low protein, moderate carb, moderate fat meal kit for like 5 days. And it's, the nice thing is that it's standardized and they're researching it on humans so that we're actually getting some good quality clinical data on it now. And it's been shown to like drop insulin, drop inflammation. I think does something to growth hormone. I forget now what it does with growth hormone, but like it has an anti-inflammatory effect. And supposedly the idea is that you can reap the benefits of doing a 5-day water fast, but you still get to eat food. So I did that first. And like I said, like it was easier than I thought it would be. I was like, oh, okay, I could do this, but I didn't feel different really in any way, shape, or form. I was just like, okay, cool, I could do this. And then I wanted to experiment doing a DIY version because the FMD kit, the Prolon kit, I forget what it is. It's like $250 or $300. So it's not cheap. And it is the same couple of meals at each, like if you want to do this every month, you would be eating the same exact food every time.
Yeah.
Because they only have one variation of it. So I was like, I'm going to try to mimic the calories and the macros, and I'm just going to eat my own food. So I had like, big salads and olives and macadamia nuts, and I forget what else. And that was better because I felt like I had more variety in my diet for the 5 days. Mm-hmm. But again, I was like, okay, I could do this. It's no big deal. But also, oh, like I don't feel that much better. And then it was actually after a weekend at my parents' house. I'm an only child, and my mom loves me so much. Hi, Mom. And she is, if you guys know, like the love languages book, she's a gift giver, love language person. So like unfortunately, she'll buy some shit food, like gluten-free Oreos or fancy gluten-free bread, or like she'll make some food item that's like overly indulgent. And very frequently, Mike and I eat like pretty healthy at home during the week, and then we go to Grandma's house on the weekends. And all three of us are eating like more food and more junky food than we otherwise would prefer. And it was after a weekend at my parents' house that I was just like, oh, I overindulged. I forget what it was, but I was just like, why did I eat all that? And I woke up Sunday morning at my folks' house, and I rolled over and I told Mike, I was like, I'm not going to eat today. He was like, okay. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm not going to eat today. Because I feel like I need a cleanse. Like, I need to take a break from eating because I feel just so, ugh. And I got through the full day and was like, all right. I got, like, the tedious bit of a hunger headache later in the day. But luckily, being a crunchy hippy dippy person, I have been making some tinctures and glycerites. And have I told you about my addiction to my cinnamon glycerite that I make?
I think you have mentioned it. It's been a while though. I'd love to hear more.
Big Red chewing gum in liquid form. It's so cinnamony. But all it is, it's glycerin, water, and cinnamon. And you cook the crap out of it for like an hour. And then you strain out the cinnamon chunks. And it makes this like cinnamony, delicious glycerin stuff. And it's just enough that I've worked out. I'm like, well, it's just enough that it can kind of stabilize my blood sugar if I need something. And it gives me a taste in my mouth, which is really nice. Like, it's just a bizarre experience to not eat anything and like not chew anything. That's the reason why I break the fast at the third day typically, is because it's just weird. Like, I crave the experience of chewing and swallowing and tasting and smelling actual food. I'm not that much more hungry, and I don't get a hunger headache by day 3. I'm just like, I kind of crave the experience of eating. Oddly enough. Yeah. But the cinnamon glycerite, I keep a little bottle in my purse when I do this. And that way I kind of give myself permission, like, oh, if I have a teeny bit of a hunger headache, or if I just want something with flavor, I will have, like a little dropper full. I'll do like 1 or 2 or 3 of these. Boom. Delish. Just that teeny bit of glycerin seems to curtail any blood sugar, or maybe it's placebo. I don't know. But I got the idea because in the Prolon FMT kits, they give you this drink and they instruct you that you can mix the drink with water and sip on it throughout the day. And I never used it because like I didn't feel the need to, but it's like glycerin, a flavoring, and then you add it to water. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, if glycerin in a small amount is okay on FMD, it probably isn't going to wreck the fast, so why don't I use the far superior, tastier version that I made, and then I can have a little bit of flavor in my life. So I do use this every now and then. But like I said, it doesn't seem to be enough to really curtail the fasting experience. I also want to point out, like, cut yourself a break if you feel like you need to break the fast faster than you otherwise would have. Like, I'm telling you now, like, all right, I'm on day 2 of what will probably be 3 or maybe 4. But if I feel like garbage tonight, I'm not going to beat myself up over the fact that I had to break the fast and I like didn't keep my promise to myself or whatever. Like, I'm just going to listen to my body. And I did that once. I got the idea right before COVID. The last seminar I went to before COVID hit was a visceral manipulation class in Baltimore. And I told my husband, I was like, I'm not going to eat for the whole trip. It's going to be great. Because normally, anywhere I go, I'm either seeking out the restaurants that are healthy and have gluten-free menus, or I'm lugging a cooler full of food and I'm bringing and figuring out, oh, what can I eat for breakfast the day of the seminar? And I decided, you know what? I think this is brilliant because my brain is like on fire. It's sharp as a tack when I'm fasting. And I have all this energy and mental clarity. So I was like, A, I'm going to be laser focused in my seminar if I don't eat. B, I don't have to lug a suitcase full of food with me to Baltimore. I think there was a third reason, but I forget now. So I was just like, no, I'm not going to eat. It's going to be great. And I got through the first 2 days, and I don't know if it was like because I was traveling. They kept the room really warm, and even I was hot the whole time, which is weird. And also, it was a visceral manipulation class, so we had people like palpating my organs and stuff all day, every day. And I don't know if like some combination thereof, but after the second day, I was like, no, I'm going to eat. So on the night of the second day, a couple of us went out and got Thai food, and it was amazing and totally worth it. And I just ended up eating for the rest of the trip, but I didn't make like a big deal out of it. I didn't think like, oh, I'm a failure and I failed this mission. And no, my body was telling me, hey man, this isn't cool anymore. I was getting like really lightheaded and woozy in the class. And I was starting to feel like particularly hot, which is very weird for me. I'm always cold. And again, I was like, well, I think part of it is that the room is warm. The warmest room.
Yes.
But I think part of it was my blood sugar was kind of like, oh, what are you doing to us? So I broke the fast. No big deal. So that one I only did 2 days. But historically, I went from FMD to, I did Prolong. Then I did a DIY version. And I was like, I'm not going to eat for a day. That went totally fine. The next time I did 2 days, and then each of the subsequent times I've done this, it's been 3 days at a stretch, with the exception of that Baltimore trip. Yeah, and I might try to push it to a fourth day today or this week if I feel game. If not, whatever.
I've been super yawny. I apologize. I'm like,
am I
boring? No, no, you are not. You're
okay.
not. And I do think that you bring up a really good point, just in general, of anything that you try. There should be a level of curiosity built around how you're feeling versus criticism. Like, I always feel like it's better to view how you're responding in a curious manner than a critical manner.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and I know I have too, like fallen in the category where it's like, oh my gosh, like, why can't I just do low FODMAP and be fine with it? But maybe, again, like, you're not getting enough nutrition, or like there's something maybe at play because you're not feeling right. And it's so important. I think it all goes back to trusting yourself. And there's certainly things that you can learn as well when you view things from a curious standpoint too. Like, oh, I wonder why I'm struggling to fast. Like, is there something else I need to kind of focus in on first? Like, there's a lot of, I still think it's critical to trust yourself, whatever experiment you're doing, whether it's fasting or not.
And kind of just hush that really nasty internal critic that we all have. Like, we all have that little voice saying, like, you're such a crappy human being. Why can't you do that better? But you know what one of the best things I've seen recently is twofold. I'm going to start with one version, and then I'm going to do the Amy version. Ready? So I've seen things like memes and such that are like, when you're talking to yourself or you're like thinking thoughts to yourself, imagine if somebody told that to your kid. Yeah. Like, if somebody told my child the things that I tell myself about myself, I would murder them. And I am not a violent person, but I would come after them with a knife. Another one, if you don't have children, you could do the same thing, but imagine whatever shitty internal dialogue thoughts that you have going on in your brain. What if somebody told that to Chip? Oh gosh. You would cut their ear off, right? Like, I would definitely murder them. You'd Van Gogh them. Yes. Like, and for those of you who don't know, Amy has a dog named Chip, and he's adorable. He is my life, and I've never met him, but that's okay. But, like, what if somebody told your dog or your child or your mom the shitty things that you tell yourself all day, every day? Like, cut yourself a freaking slack. Like, just this week, this is a tangent, but it's worth it. Just this week, on Marco Polo, one of my best friends, I was painting, and while I was poloing her, because I'll do like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there between appointments typically, and I was poloing her, and she was like, "Oh, you're a better mom than me because you are like
Oh, no.
crafty. You yeah." And she's like, "Yeah, you're a better mom than me because you're like crafty, and you probably could do like homemade Halloween costumes. And I'm not that kind of mom." And I'm like, "Oh, sweetie, like, you don't have to be crafty to be a good mom. My mom hates arts and crafts with a fiery passion, and I love arts and crafts and sewing and stuff and crocheting just like on my own. And I did that more with my grandmother. But like, my mom's an amazing mom and she doesn't give a shit about arts and crafts. Right. So you don't need to be that person. And even too, I'm crafty and I like, I paint with my daughter and like I'll do crafting projects. And like we dyed Easter eggs this year and like we'll do crafting projects. But then there's always something where like there's this other mom. Hi, Allison, if you're listening. But there's this other mom in my friend circle who I adore, and she's like ultra crafty.
Right.
Right? Like she has one of those, oh God, what do you call them? There's some contraption, there's some device that's like Singer or I'm going to remember it later, and then people are going to comment on YouTube and be like, it's a such and such machine. Well, she has one of these machines, and it's like $1 gajillion, and it's very complex. It has a million buttons, and she can like make cutouts of vinyl and stuff.
My gosh.
And like, so she could like decal your water bottles for you, and she could decal like an apron and cut things out of like very intricate patterns. Like she's got one of those things, and she does do homemade Halloween costumes, I'm pretty sure. And like, I as a crafty person, look at that mom and I'm like, I'm not as good of a mom as her because she's like more crafty than me. So like just all of it's crap. Don't even worry about that internal critic that's like, you could be doing a better job at that. Look at that mom. Look at that person. Look at that person on the SIBO forum. She's doing a better job at Live FODMAP than you are. Like just, just get rid of that voice. It's full of baloney.
Right. I think it's so funny too because I bet Allison, like the super crafty, like there's some other mom that's maybe even more craftier than her. Yeah. And then it goes on and on. And
yeah, it's like at some point, it's and maybe there's other things too. Like maybe that other mom is criticizing herself because like she doesn't
play sports or something,
brownies or like play sports or another example I was going to say is gardening, but I know Allison does gardening with her daughter too. But like, there's so many things that you're like, oh, I wish I could. And like, just because somebody's healing journey, to kind of bring it back home, just because somebody healed their SIBO faster than you, or just because somebody, has had more antibiotics than you, but they have better gut health despite that, or just because like this came up in my Facebook forum recently, somebody was really distraught. And she was like, I'm really frustrated and angry and bitter because like she's having to restrict her diet quite a bit right now for the sake of healing. And she's doing better, but she's still needing to restrict and her body still gets kind of PO'd at her. But then her brother, I forget what it was, but like her brother makes these YouTube videos where he eats all of this like crazy spicy food and puts it on YouTube. And she's like, if I even look at a tomato right now, my histamine, my mast cells go crazy. Like, why did he get the good genetics in the family? And he could eat literally like the hottest hot sauce on planet Earth and film it for his YouTube channel. And I'm sitting here debating whether or not I could eat a tomato one time this week. And I was like, it's tough because like we see people who can eat McDonald's and not get diarrhea, or we see people who can eat hot sauce and not get hives. And it's so tough because even, whether the person's in your family or outside of your family, it could be so difficult to see that and wish like, oh, if only that could be me. Like, what if that was me? Why can't I be that lucky? Why can't I be that person? But I think that's like a variant of your inner critic coming out. Like, you should be healing faster. You should be doing better. You should be working harder. It's like, shut up. Just, it's your own pace. It's your own journey. And there's always going to be something that you would change if you could. But just do the best that you can and show up every day and try to live in the present moment. And that's my shtick. I feel like you should talk now. I'm going on a big tangent here, but
well, and I do find it's something that you can see relatively quickly. I'm sure you see it too in the clients that we work in. Like, it's pretty quick. You can tell pretty quickly if someone's critical of themselves. Like, oh, and a lot of times I'll talk to someone and it'll be like a follow-up call. And they'll say, oh, I like feel like I didn't do that great this month, like with some of the like recommendations. And I'm like, well, let's like talk through what you did do. Right. Let's talk through what you did do. And they did a lot. Like, there might be one or two things that are not like where we want them to be, or like things that, again, we still want to work on. But it's like you've hit like most of the things. It's not perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's all about progress, not perfection.
I see that too. I'll see people, or I'll have patients that in an appointment, they'll be like, I have a confession to make.
Right.
It's like, am I the Catholic
it's
Church?
So like, shameful.
Yeah, they're ashamed of themselves. And then there's always like, they're working their ass off. Yeah. And they're actually making a lot of changes, and they've been really diligent about taking their supplements, and like they're getting better about their sleep. Like, there's always something that they've done positive, but like they're beating themselves up because like they didn't get this one supplement I recommended, or they weren't able to introduce a new food yet. It's like, that's okay. Like, I always joke with people, I'm like, this is your healing journey, not mine.
Right.
I want you to feel better ASAP, obviously, but it doesn't matter to me in this sense whether you heal in 3 months or 15 years. Like, I want you to feel better. But, like, as far as, like, me and my ego and my needs and my stuff, like, it's all right. Like, you go at whatever pace you need to go at. And if you are dealing with stuff in your life, or you're up to here with bullshit in your life, and you're only able to layer in 3 of the 5 things we talked about, that's still amazing progress.
Right. And that's a discussion I have with my clients, too. It's like, where you're at, you have this much resources to dole out.
Yeah.
As we layer stuff in, that the resource pool and the energy that you have to devote to stuff may increase and make it easier to add stuff in.
Yep.
But yeah, you're totally right. I mean, a lot of people that come and work with us, have a limited energy and resource pool that they're able to go to implement things. So it is about, again, the key thing I always tell people is it's about progress, not perfection. Yep. So like, how are we progressing? What kind of things can we continue to tweak and work on? But I'm never like, again, I think they think that we're like going to be the like SIBO police or something like that. Or the IBS police.
Yeah, I think usually within an appointment or two with me, usually they kind of have a sense that that's not the case. But it's kind of heartbreaking, because you know that if they are coming to your appointment and they're saying like, I have a confession to make, or I wasn't very good this month, you know that their internal dialogue, their inner critic, is way worse. Like, their inner critic is saying, you are a human piece of shit, and you shouldn't even, like, probably saying horrible stuff if they're coming to us with that kind of stuff. And it's really heartbreaking, because I can imagine the internal dialogue. Yeah, and for sure. I have my fair share about it. Don't even think that I don't. But like, it's a lot, and you're putting that weight on yourself, and it's just going to weigh you down and impede your progress. And I will say too, before I forget the thought that popped in my brain, is you touched on something really important, which is like how much reserve you have. And that's something like with the fasting, in my brain, my left brain, my analytical frontal lobe has told myself for a while now, I want to do a 3-day fast every other month. Okay, cool. But there's also the human experience and life. So like I said, I did my last attempt. It was the weekend of March 1st, 2020. And then I came home, and immediately the world went to crazy town. And by the time I got to, theoretically, if I did my fast on March 1st, I should have done another one on May 1st. But we were still in lockdown, and things were crazy, and I was worried about my business. I was worried about my kid and my parents and my mom with autoimmune disease and all this shit. And I didn't have the reserves. My adrenals were fried to a damn crisp for so long with the pandemic that I don't think I did the March fast, and then I probably didn't do my next one until sometime in the fall. So even though I had told myself, I had set that goal, and I told myself, oh, we're going to do this every other month, I knew at the time I did not have the reserves in the tank, and it was just not going to be like a good experience for me, and it wasn't going to be a beneficial experience for me in that moment to do a fast, because I was already just like barely functioning. And I went through a period of a lot of scary hair loss around the beginning of COVID, because I think I was just so stressed that I was giving myself mange, basically. I was losing hair by the chunks. And thankfully, I knew at the time, I was like, no, my body's got enough to deal with right now.
Right.
I'm going to prioritize like other stuff right now and my stress reduction. And that's when I started painting, was last year because of COVID. And I'm really grateful that I didn't force myself to do a fast, even though I had set up this expectation of like, I'm going to do it every other month for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Right. I
Nobody
think that's
cares.
such a great point. And I also think just in the context of like mindset and things like that, it's funny because I talked to a client yesterday, and it's like they had a death in the family. She had a death in her family, moved to a new place, and then like all this work stress. And she's like, oh, like I definitely am like a little bloated, but like again, like if she's doing relatively like okay, like I think that's almost a win too. Like again, if you're feeling like you're holding together or like staying the same
despite all that,
despite like tons of stuff, like again, there might have been some ups and downs and things like that throughout that, but like I also think sometimes it's good to celebrate like resilience in some ways when you're going through healing, that okay, when stressors do come up and you're feeling like, oh, like I'm not really improving, but I'm staying about the same, like that's still a positive thing.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with patients before. Like I know one lady, we did our first appointment, and for whatever reason, I don't remember why, but I sent her home with some tinctures of like adaptogens and nervines, because we both agreed, we were like, stress is like a big driving factor for you. And like literally a couple of days after her appointment, she found out that her kid was like exposed to another kid with COVID. And they had to do a 2-week quarantine with their family. So she was working from home, and I think her husband was working from home, and she had 2 youngish children, like I forget, 6 and 8 or something. And her children were driving her crazy. And she was already stressed because her health is going to shit. And I remember she was just like, the fact that I'm able to function right now is a testament to these tinctures. Will you please mail me more of them? Because I don't want to run out. And we were like, okay, cool. And that was like the first indication of like, hey, this thing is working for you. Great. And just the fact that she was holding it together at all during that stress and that time, I think something else came up for her too. We were just like, this is a win. You're doing good. Just hang in there. You're hanging on by a thread, but you're hanging on, damn it. So just keep going.
Yeah.
So that's worthy of attention and applause.
For sure. 100%. And in terms of fasting, what else?
To get back to the main point of the
podcast. We had like a derailment of like 15 minutes, I feel like.
It was worth it. A comment in the YouTube comments down below. I think that was a worthwhile conversation. Okay. And if you didn't, well, tough titties. I don't know what to tell you. Continue.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other... When you are fasting, just out of curiosity, I know you said like, do you feel that like, is there any day that you feel like is more of like the hump, like getting over a hump, or... From a hunger food standpoint, it sounds like, again, like usually at some point things sort of level out, like hunger wise.
Yeah.
Is that what you find?
I'm shocked still. And I've been doing this, I think I did my first Prolon about 2 years ago. So it's been about 2 years in the works for me. No, what's weird is when I did Prolon and when I did the FMD, the DIY version, I did feel like there was a little bit of a hump. Because like the first day, I think they drop you down to like 700 calories for the first day, and then you do like 400 or 500 calories for the other remaining days. And I think like I was grateful to have that little bit of a ramp, because I did feel like the first day doing the FMD was a little bit, oh, I'm hungry, I'm not loving this. And then by day 2, I think my body kind of started to adjust enough that it wasn't so bad.
Mm-hmm.
What's weird is when I do the water fast, I mean, I'll do water, tea. I can't stand coffee, so I won't do coffee, but I'll do water and tea and occasionally a little dropper of my glycerin stuff. And no, like, I don't feel like there's any hump with it. My body's just like, all right, we're doing this. And I would say that the benefits I start feeling are sometime towards the end of day 1.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, like, by the end of the day yesterday, my brain was like, yeah, all the synapses are synapsing, all networks are go. Like, not in a hyper ADHD kind of way, but in a like just any sort of mental fog I had is gone kind of a way.
Nice.
So yeah, usually that mental clarity and that like everything is firing, all cylinders are firing. Usually that kicks in like midway or late day at some point in day 1. I'm noticing that the more I do this, the faster I drop into that. So like even, yesterday, so I ate dinner with my family Monday evening, and then it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'll do the fast. And we're recording this on a Wednesday. And so, yesterday was my first day of the fast. And probably by like lunchtime yesterday, I was already like, yeah, baby. Let's do it.
Nice.
All the things. And I conquered my email lion, actually.
Oh.
So we recorded that episode with Julia King 2 weeks ago. I kid you not, it took me 2 weeks to get to that lion because I had convinced myself that there was a boogeyman in my inbox. And there was a boogeyman, but only because I hadn't answered my emails for 2 weeks.
No. Oh,
so then that kind of kills me. But I had this huge hurdle in my mind of answering my GD emails. And then yesterday, the first day of my fast, very effortlessly and without a lot of dwelling on it, I just opened up my email and started answering emails. I was like, whoa, like what all just happened there? Because I can tell you, me internally beating myself up and saying, I can't believe you're not answering your emails. What kind of a business owner are you? You probably have something that's a real dumpster fire and people are going to write you a 1-star Google review and people are going to hate you because you're not answering your emails. Like, I had plenty of that for the last 2 weeks of my life. And no amount of that shit talk was motivating to me. And then coincidentally on the first day of my fast, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'll answer my emails.
So basically what you're saying, you've heard it here first, people. If you want to answer your GD emails, first you gotta fast.
Just don't eat.
Heyo.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but like some synapse that wasn't clicking and synapsing is now like connected and like, nope, we're okay. It's been really helpful.
I'd be curious too, because I know you have the Aura ring. And is this the first fast that you're wearing the Aura ring?
I don't think so. Because I got the Aura ring in like early October last year, and I think I did one in the early fall, and then I'm trying to remember the exact timing. I think I did one either right before or right after Thanksgiving. I forget which. And then this might actually be my first one. Similarly, I think it is. This is my first one for 2021 because after the holidays, I thought, oh, I should do another fast. I don't think I got a chance to do it in January. And then basically like second week of January through mid-February, I was kicking my own butt and frying my adrenals because I was getting FODMAP Freedom ready to relaunch. And I was like so wiped out, working all weekend, every weekend for like a month and a half.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't have put my body through that during that time. And I don't think I got a chance to do it in early January. So I think this is my first fast of the year, which again, like theoretically I'm overdue.
Right.
But I'm like, whatever. Like, it's my body, it's my choice, it's whatever. Side note, did I ever tell you that so I'm a crunchy person, and I'm also like, I'm the kind of parent that I have taught my child what a vagina is and what a penis is, and like she knows the correct terminology. We don't call it like a wee-wee or a poo-poo or whatever.
Right.
And she knows the general gist of like babies grow in the mommy's tummy. She doesn't get the whole mechanics of how the babies get there.
Right.
But she understands, and we've discussed for whatever reason that babies come out of the mommy's vagina. And she gets that. Did I ever tell you that from a young age, I taught her my body, my choice? Like, no, if your friend says don't hit him, you have to listen. It's his body, his choice. Or if daddy says to not take a flying leap off of the back of the couch onto him and break every bone in his body, you need to listen to him because it's his body, his choice. And if you don't want somebody touching you or hugging you, your body, your choice. And that seemed like such a wonderful thing to teach a child. And then she started using that against me.
Oh, no.
So being the very strong-willed child that I have, you know, sometimes you have to like discipline your child or drag them to the bathroom kicking and screaming to brush their teeth. And like, since I think she first did this when she was like 3, but we'd scoop her up and be like, nope, it's time to brush teeth. And she'll literally scream at us, my body, my choice. I'm like, darn it.
Gosh.
Why did I teach you this? So I feel a little hypocritical sometimes, but I forget how I got on that tangent. But yes, I taught Jess my body, my choice. And sometimes she throws that directly in my face. And I'm internally like, can I tell her that mommy and daddy are the exception to that? That sometimes we just need her to brush her teeth?
Right.
But Lord knows.
Oh my
How did I get on
gosh.
that tangent, by the way?
I'm trying to circle back and
I got nothing.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking about, I don't know.
Oh, no, the fact that I'm theoretically overdue for the fast because this is my first one of the year, but it's my body, my choice.
Yes,
I think I said the words my body, my choice, and then my brain was like,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so for what it's worth, it's, you know, it is what it is. But generally speaking, I try to do this every other month. I also tried to research, and I still have not come to a good conclusion on this. I tried to research if there's an appropriate time to do this within like the confines of the menstrual cycle. I don't know. I tried to research it a little bit. This was like 2 years ago, so now I forget. For whatever reason, a lot of the times I've done this, I've happened to land like the week after my period. So like mid follicular cycle for some reason. I don't know why, but that's like when I get the itch to do it. And like this weekend, I was like, oh, I'm overdue. I need to do a fast. I overindulged in junk food at my parents' house again. So this weekend, I told Mike, I was like, oh, FYI, I'm going to do another fast. I think I'm going to do it Tuesday through Thursday. And he's like, okay, cool. But yeah, for whatever reason, like when I kind of feel the craving to do the fasting, for whatever reason, for me, it seems to generally land like second week of my menstrual cycle. So I'm not on my period. I'm not ovulating. I'm not PMSing. I don't get PMS, but whatever. Like it's kind of that mid follicular phase where my body seems to want to do this. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't think it's better or worse or anything, but it is what it is. And I have one more point to share before this also flies out of my brain while it's on my radar. And then I think we might have talked about all the things I could think of with regards to fasting. So a friend of mine, a really good friend, has been doing the Dave Asprey Bulletproof Fasting Challenge. Like he's got a Facebook group or something. And she's been doing really well on it and feeling really great. And it's a combination of like time-restricted eating and doing like the bulletproof coffee and the brain octane and his sort of stuff. And the diet, it seems like a dairy-free version of keto. Like all of the fats are coming from like plant-based oils for the most part. So it's actually, it's a variation of keto that I can kind of get behind. And she and her husband are doing it together. They've been reading Dave Asprey's book and they've been getting a lot out of it. She lost a bunch of weight. Like her husband's nasty rash is gone. They feel like really good mental clarity wise. But what was interesting is the first time they did it, they just went right into it. And they were like, yeah, all fully keto, no carbs, no nothing. And then she got wicked PMS before her period. And she was like, what is going on? Like, I forget now what it was, but I think she was either like ultra bitchy and crabby at her poor husband, or I think it was like messing with her sleep. All sorts of things PMS wise were really off kilter for her. And then like they got to the point in Dave Asprey's book where he said, oh, I don't think women should always be doing intermittent fasting. like you should probably eat more carbs and not do the IF thing around your period. And that way you're not freaking your hormones out too much. And that you could do the intermittent fasting and you could do the carbohydrate restriction, you know, basically like beyond that period of time, pun not intended. But I thought that was worthwhile to mention too, since a fair whack of our listeners are probably women. And I've never done fasting during like the PMS window or during my period. It always kind of falls in like the mid-cycle for me when I choose to do it. But for what it's worth, apparently that is a thing that can affect you. And this cycle, she was much more careful to make sure that she had like some potatoes and sweet potatoes and a little bit of brown rice and like not doing the intermittent fasting so much. And now they're kind of getting back on the wagon for the rest of the month. But that was an interesting learning experience for her. Interesting and not pleasant, I would add, for her to discover that. But keep in mind that female hormones sometimes get a bit wackadoo when you start restricting calories or carbs or both, and you don't want to totally piss off your cycle hormones.
Right. I think that can also be just a useful tool to monitor as well, to make sure, because your cycle is a good indicator of if your body's stressed or not.
Yeah.
And so if you're noticing changes in your cycle or your cycle's delayed or, you know, maybe you miss a cycle, you might still want to adjust things to make sure you're having a cycle and ovulating regularly, so that the fasting is not stressing your body out too much. So I actually think, like, I know it can be annoying to get periods as women, but it is something that we have that can be a good report card from a health standpoint that men don't have, to be able to kind of understand how because really, like, your body's going to shut down or change reproductive hormones if it thinks that you can't carry a baby. Whether we want one or not, our body wants one, I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint. And if you don't have the resources and tools to build a baby and birth a baby and take care of a baby, then your body wants to shut things down from a reproductive standpoint. So it's always an important tool to use. And I actually think, like, it's something we all should monitor closely as women to make sure, we're looking good, like things are staying pretty consistent. And if it isn't, it might be that you're under some sort of stress, whether it's fasting or something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good report card. Honestly, too, you know what another one is that it's hard to see this in the moment, but try to get what I mean. Skin problems are actually kind of great. Like eczema and hives and psoriasis and acne are kind of the best things to work with.
Yeah.
Because it can feel so hard to really know if you are treating inflammation or doing the right thing for your gut microbiome or doing something that is good for you. But when you have a skin condition, it's going to drive you up the wall, especially if it's itchy. And it's going to be like something you're self-conscious about because it's external. But the nice thing about rashes is that it gives you this report card. Yeah. Theoretically, if you have eczema, you can take a photo of that eczema every single day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And you have documented proof, like visible actual proof, whether or not your eczema was pissed off that day or not. And you can trace it back to triggers in your life or stress in your life. So nobody wants to hear that their symptom that's driving them crazy is actually a good thing. But in a way, I get like weirdly excited when one of my IBS patients also has eczema or also has hives or psoriasis or something, because I'm like, great, can you document the crap out of that? And then we know that we have an external thing to monitor in addition to how you feel, in addition to the lab work that we get done. But like looking at your skin and taking a picture of your skin is free, and you can do it every day, and it can kind of teach you self-awareness. We're like check in on how you feel. Like that sounds so airy-fairy that not everybody can click with that immediately, but like take a picture of your skin. Is your skin pissed off today? Yes or no? Cool. Like there's a really quick, easy report card that everybody can do. And I feel the same way about like menstrual cycle difficulties can actually be kind of a blessing in disguise in a way, because it's your body telling you, hey, are you solid enough that you could have a baby? Like, what is your body's priority right now? Sexy, sexy baby time?
Right.
Or survival? And if you're not having a period, you know that you're in survival mode. You are not in sexy, sexy baby time. That's it. It's a very binary thing.
Yeah, you need to trademark sexy, sexy, sexy baby time.
Hashtag sexy, sexy baby time.
Yes,
we'll see if that sticks on Instagram.
Yeah, I love that. Sexy, sexy baby time. You need 2 sexies, 2 babies, and then time.
And time. Absolutely. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up this episode. Unless you can. Were there things that you were like, oh man, we should cover this? Or do you think we pretty much hit all the high notes? Side note, yet again, I am amused that I thought this was going to be a short episode, and then...
It's because we always inherently add like a 20-minute diversion.
Well, there's that, because we're full of wisdom, people.
Yeah.
But also because I adore talking to you so much that I could talk to you all day, every day for the rest of my life. And we would always find something to talk about. So it's also just that I get such an immense amount of joy talking to you every week. And I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times. Podcast recording day is my favorite day of the week, because I look forward to seeing that bright, shiny face on my webcam every week. And it's just, yeah, that's the danger, is we click too well, so that we find a million things to talk about on the podcast. But hopefully our listeners get something out of it, and it's not just like rabbit trails for the sake of rabbit trails. I hope so.
No, I agree. I think most of the time, minus a few diversions, are helpful in some way or have some something that you can take away from. But yeah, I think it's our podcast. We can talk. We can do what we want, and but yeah, I think we covered all the fasting things. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything I would add.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of options. Like I said, though, for a lot of people listening, the irony is probably just getting to like 3 square meals a day and not snacking
right.
and not stressing about it is probably step 1 for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to dip your toe in the water, see if you could go half a day without eating. See if you could go 1 whole day without eating. See, kind of experiment and be playful and see what your body is receptive to. And if your body sends you signals that say, hell to the no, what are you doing to me? Listen. Don't push it. Don't think, oh, because Dr. Daneza says to fast, I need to fast. Just like, know that might be something that's not in the cards now, but maybe 10 years in the future it is. Like for me, it was 10 years before I got around to trying this. And, maybe I could have tried it 5 years ago, and maybe it would have been an okay thing for me 5 years ago. And I just didn't know because I never tried. But like when I was still really hot in my healing journey, I had a restrictive diet. I had bigger fish to fry. I don't think it would have made sense. But like if you feel like you're nutrient replete enough and you could tolerate it, or maybe you have some insulin resistance that you're hoping to work on, you feel like your blood sugar is not going to totally be wiped out doing this, or maybe like if you have a primary chief complaint of joint pain or a rash or an autoimmune disease, like anything that is inherently inflammatory driven, more so than it is a purely microbially driven situation, like the more inflammatory stuff, the more I would think about doing fasting. Because that's where, like, I have had patients where, like, they had joint pain and then they did some fasting and their joint pain went away.
Yeah.
But, I would never recommend that to somebody who's blatantly malnourished or somebody who's in the throes of, like, trying to combine a million different restrictive diets and they're trying to do all the SIBO protocols. So, kind of figure it out if you think that it's appropriate for you to do as an individual. But it can be a really therapeutic tool, especially if you have a lot of inflammation that you need to get down. So check it out. I was glad that I did. It was a very happy surprise that I found that my body, A, tolerates it so well, and B, feels like $1 million when I do it. So for what it's worth, try it out if you think it's appropriate for you. And as always, you guys know the drill. If you are on an audio-only app, if you could leave us a 5-star review, that would be super duper ultra mega appreciated. And if you are on YouTube, if you can like this video, comment down below. We are gathering comments for Q&As that we do occasionally, so keep popping those Qs in the the chat box thingy on YouTube, and we will do Q&As every now and then. And what did I say? Like, ring the bell, subscribe. That's what you do on YouTube. And we will see you in the next episode of the IBS Freedom Podcast. Toodaloo.